Welcome to our next video. So what I want to do in this video is to actually discuss panic recovery. So we did this in the previous series, and so I just want to add that to our code base for completeness. Okay, so previously we were looking at errors and how to log our errors. And so now let's just create a middleware that allows us to handle errors so that the client can be notified that there was an unrecoverable error. All right. So we'll be making middleware, which is something we have done in the previous series. Okay, so let me create a new middleware file. So I will simply use touch. CMD / API / middleware .go. Alright, so we have our middleware file, and so in this file we will write our middleware to deal with recovery from panics. Okay, so this is a part of package main. Let's just import FMT and let's import net HTTP. Okay, so if you recall, when creating middleware, it simply is a piece of code that gets called first before we pass on to our handlers. Okay, so let's create a middleware. Of course, it's on application, and this middleware will be named recover panic. Okay. And so this middleware will take a HTTP handler. All right, again, nothing new. We know what this does, and it will return an HTTP handler. All right. Okay, so we want our handler to return, okay, an HTTP handler. So to create an HTTP handler, we're going to call http.handler func. All right, and so we need a function inside this handler function. And so let's create a function. Okay, let's say func, and of course it's http response writer. Right, so in a sense we're creating a handler. Right. Able to respond to HTTP requests. Right, and so we have our function. And so what exactly will we do? All we're going to do is to create a defer function. Okay, and the job of the defer function will be called if we encounter problems. And so if error is recover, all right. So if we call recover and we find out that error is not nil, then there was a panic. And when there's a panic, of course, we're going to unwind the stack, and then of course we're going to call a defer function before we exit. And so if there's a panic, then this function will be called. And what should this function do? Well, it should set the header information. Okay, so header that's set, and what should it set it to? It should set the connection to close. In other words, we need to close that connection. And after we close that connection, then we need to notify the user or the client that something went wrong. And so we're going to simply call app.server error response. We're going to pass in W, we're going to pass in R, and we're going to pass in the error. Unfortunately, the error, right, you notice the error has to be converted to an error message. So what I have to do, I have to convert this, all right, because you notice it says interface. So it could be of any type of error. But what I want to do is to convert it to, let me take that back. Error could be of any type, all right? So the empty interface. But I want it to actually be an error message. And so I have to convert it to an error. And so to do that, I'm going to simply say fmt dot error f. And what it does, according to a format specifier, and returns a string as a value that satisfies error. So it returns an error. It converts whatever type it was here, which we don't know, to an error type, because that's what error response expects. It expects an error as the third argument. So I'm going to simply say modulus s, and then I'm going to specify error. Okay, and so that will be what will be converted. Okay, so let's here. All right, we're not done yet. Great. So I need to call this defer. So defer has to be called. So we have to put the open close parenthesis. All right. And then this is the close of my handler func. Okay. Now there's one thing I want to do right here. I want to call the next handler in the chain. Okay, so I'm going to say next. Okay, and I'm going to simply call the serve HTTP method on next, which again is something we have done and discussed previously. So this should not be new to you. All right. Okay, so serve HTTP expects the response writer and the request. So we're going to put in W and we're going to put in R. All right. So this is all we need to do. So again, this is the recovery panic middleware. It accepts a handler. In other words, who should we pass off or call? Right, the next handler in the chain. And so if we have some panic, we're going to deal with this, and then we're going to call, well, let's take that back. We're going to deal with this. All right. Okay, now if there is no panic, then obviously the defer will be skipped, and if the defer is skipped, then we'll simply call the next handler in the chain. All right, let's save that. And so now we need to actually use our middleware. And if you recall, all we need to do is to go to the routes file. Okay, so we come here, and we will no longer be returning a router. We will have to now return an HTTP handler. Okay. Okay. So by returning our HTTP handler, we will have to return. And notice I will have to return. I will have to wrap my middleware here. So I'm going to simply say app dot recover panic. Okay. And this is what I get. So when we call a route, or when a routes function is called, and we create our map with our routes and their handlers, then we want to return this router but wrapped in this middleware, which means that if we have some problem, then we need to actually do a panic. Otherwise, we simply pass off to whatever next route handler we should actually call. Again, we have discussed middleware extensively in the previous series. Just keep in mind that this recovery panic will be called, and if everything goes okay, then this recovery panic code will call the router. Okay, so you can think of it that way. Okay, let's start our server just to make sure everything still works, and it still works. And so that's it. We've come to the end of this section where we have added panic recovery. So it's a good time to do a commit. So let's just say git add. All right, and git commit. And let's just say added panic recovery code. Okay, and let's just push this. So git push origin main. Great. So I'll see you in the next lesson where we will start looking at rate limiting and how do we ensure that there are not too many requests being sent to our server at any given instance. I'll see you then.